Okay, that means it's going. Cool. Okay, so um, what we're going to be doing today is we're going to be learning how to create what I said was responsive architecture. Okay, so if I zoom into my script, you'll see I have these two different portions. Um, wh what is the first portion is the sun system, and that is going to be what is controlling the response of the architecture you see over here. Okay, and the second portion of the script is going to be this responsive system. Okay, it looks more intense than it really is because it actually can probably uh, be this whole part only, and I've added the second portion to it. Okay, and that's really just to kind of give you something more to play with. Also, it's nothing particularly new. It's just using things that you already know in a new way, right? So we're going to work with circles to start with, but you can see that I've made it so that it can be either circles or I have a polygon attached to it. So if that tells you anything, that tells you that what we're really controlling is not the shape of it so much as the radius of it. Okay, so if I look here at what is this circle array is what I'm calling it, you'll see that there's this radius that is attached to all of this extra information. And this is what we're going to use to control we have a graph mapper in here where we're going to be controlling the um, the map of the radii. So it's going to be controlled right, just following the graph. But then there's a secondary map that is going to be, it's called remap numbers, and that's going to be controlled using the location of the sun. Okay, so you can see my sun here, and he's moving about. And what he's doing is he's making the radii larger as he gets to be more south, right? Because this is my north. And then as he moves up, they get smaller because they don't need to be as large. Okay. So so in this script, there's kind of two responses, right? There's the one that is the response from the sun, and then there's the other one where it's me controlling the graph of the graph mapper and where this fading is occurring, right? So what we'll first do is we'll first create, well, first we have to create the base of this, okay? So we have to create this kind of sun circle that we have, the north arrow, and then, of course, the sun. Okay, so that's kind of our environment that we have to construct. Second, then we have to construct this kind of wall or plane facade, and we have to array circles across that facade. Okay, and then we'll get into the control, the responsive part of where the sun affects the radii on that wall. And then the third part is to apply the graph mapper to that so that we can control the fade in and out across the facade. Okay, so I think the only real new part is this remap area. So not saying you can fall asleep, but just saying it shouldn't be too wild for you. Okay, so let's create this environment. So if we look at the sun system here, okay, I have my sun system set up, and I have a few key controls. I have a compass size. If I look over here, man, my screen is not large enough for the script. Okay, my compass size, right? It's really just a circle. I have my azimuth. This is the location about the center. It's really a rotation, isn't it? Okay, and then my altitude is the height. Okay, so if I go down to 0, it is at 0 height. It just follows along the curve. So the altitude gives it some sort of height in the sky. So that's our controls. So how we set that up. So first, to get the compass, the size of it, we're going to need this circle, right? So I'm going to move this and work up here. So I'm going to grab a circle, okay? And we're going to do this circle defined by a plane and a radius, okay? Circle defined by a plane and a radius. I think I did that quickly. So this guy, right? He has a gold box around him, right? And the default is already at 0, 0. Okay, so I'm not sure we particularly need to place a plane there. However, you can see that in my script I need a start point. So if I do construct point, I can have a capsule where I can extract that. I can also do a center point, so to also get that same point. So it's up to you which way you do this. But we'll do construct plane, since that's the way we've modeled the script. Okay, construct plane, construct point. Okay, construct point here. And if we haven't, I don't think we've used this one before, but it's really just constructing a point based off of x, y, and z. And that can also tell us, an origin point for a location for an object or for a plane. Okay. Then next we need some sort of radius. So the radius I just set at say 50. And remember, 50 will give us a number slider default from 0 to a 100. So that's a kind of nice general compass size based on how big everything is going to be later. And if you guys haven't done this yet, remember your units down here. I'm working in feet. So if you haven't done that already, you should probably make sure that your Rhino file is working here in units in feet. Okay, if it's not, you can change it right now and click OK, and then it will ask you if you want to scale the model or scale the Rhino model, and you'll say yes. Okay, and that should kind of help you as we get along. It's not that you can't use millimeters. I think it's usually the default, but it just kind of it's a little wonky, especially if you're starting to actually scale things at any other later point. Okay, so we have our circle as our compass, and then I'm going to bring this guy out because he's important, right? I'm going to call him my compass size, right click, call it compass size. Okay, group him, and if I want to, I can make him this blob like before. Okay, I kind of went a little label crazy, I guess, on this one. So just so you know, when you open the script later, there should be sufficient labels on everything to help guide you through this. Okay, so we have our circle. Now what I need to do is I need to create this line. See, I have a line that's from the center point to the it's along the y-axis, and that's going to be what is my kind of north arrow. So I'm going to create a line using the AB one, right? The start point, end point. Okay. And my start point can be the constructed point here. And then my end point is going to be, well, we can say this guy, but it's not going to work because we need a vector. Okay, so we need to add a y vector, since it's going to be along the y-axis. And that vector will then go in to my my endpoint, and then I will add my radius to that. And what that's going to do is it's going to create a line from the start point along the y vector that is 30 some feet long. Okay, as I change that, it should update as my radius changes. Okay, so it seems pretty simple, right? Circle, line, this is too easy. Okay, but then the next part we need to do is we need to add this north the character. So what we're going to do is we're going to grab an endpoints to get the endpoint of that line. Okay, and at that endpoint then we'll create a three-dimensional tag. Okay, so you can see here that the capsule is called text tag 3D. Okay, and that should be available under display. I think here under dimensions, and it can be text tag 3D. You can also just type it in, of course. Text tag. Okay, and what that's going to do is it's going to create for us some sort of tag on our Grasshopper script for us to see visually. Okay, so location, is this the right location? Start, end, I think it's the end point. Okay, right? End point. We want it to be at the y vector, so it should be the end. Okay. The text that we're going to place in there is going to be, we're going to need a panel. Okay. And in that, we'll just type N for north. Okay, and I'm going to right click and get rid of the titling. Bring this down to a smaller size, and then input that into my text. Notice it's located there, it's just really tiny. So the next thing we need to do is control that size. Okay, so the size is going to be, I don't know, say like 1.5, right? Because we're working in feet, and the default is 1. So let's say 1.5, and then we can start to, you know, play with that. So we'll say, yeah, that's good. Okay. And then if this is driving you crazy, like it's driving me crazy, you can see here that it's to the right. That's this justification entry. So if I right click on that, this is bottom left and middle center. It's just like any other text box, right? So I'm going to choose bottom center, and that way it's on the it's centered on the point, but it's also keeping that bottom line, and it's not over my compass. Okay. All right. So this is the north arrow. I can kind of start to label these for my future self. North arrow. Group this together. Okay. This is my constructed point, circle, line. Okay. I think we're good on that part. The next thing we need to do is we need to create the sun, right? So we have the base all set up. Now we need this sun. Okay, so the way we did that was we created some sort of rotation. Okay, so I used the same line here, and I just added a rotation to it. Okay, so we'll do a rotate. Just rotate an object in a plane. Okay. The object that we're going to rotate is going to be that line about the center. Okay, so this guy. And then there's some default angle that we have to remember is in radians. So we do not know radians unless you do, and that's impressive. But I'm going to type in this radians and grab this capsule that changes degrees to radians. Okay, so then we just need the degrees to control, and that's going to be this next slider that we're going to bubble. Okay, so I'm going to give it 360, and I want it to be 360 degrees max, so I have to right click, edit, go into my max, and change that so that we have 360 as our maximum, and then we can scale that up and down, and then if I enter that into my degrees, we can watch as it completes a full circle. Okay. So that's good. We have one part of it. Okay. But the next part then, so we have the rotation, but what we need to do is we need to give this some height, right? So this is the rotation about the center, but we need to give it an altitude. So the altitude is going to be a combination of getting the endpoint of that new curve. Okay.
Did you just add the sphere?
That's the old sphere. That's the
Oh,
sphere that we're working towards.
oh.
Yeah, that's the. I have him there for reference, but maybe it's a little confusing. That's where we're going to. We're going to try to make him. Yeah, I just changed the angle really dramatically, so it probably looked new. Sorry. So yeah, so we're going to make the sphere, but we need to get the endpoint here, and then we have to move that endpoint up in space so that we can give it some altitude. So we're going to give it a Z motion and move. Okay, so we'll take the endpoint again, which is this. The default motion is already Z, but this way we have better control because we're going to give it a factor. Okay, so the factor, I think I'm also going to probably give it like, I don't know, we'll say 20. Okay, pull that over, and you can see it has a similar height as to my sphere there. Okay, so that's going to be my sun, and as I shift this around, you can see how that follows, right? Because it's the same geometry below. It's just a moved up point.
Wait, what was the number?
Uh,
Sorry, I keep
oh,
you.
nope, you're fine. The number was I gave it 20, but it's probably going to be somewhere around like, yeah, 14 to 20. I would limit this actually to right click edit, and I would put a limit on this for 25 because you won't really want your sun to be, you know, way the heck up here. It's kind of bizarre. So we'll keep her relatively low, max of 25. Okay. And then the final part is once you have your point moved up in space, now we're going to grab a sphere. Okay, so double click and type in sphere. Okay, you can see the default base is right here at the center. And we want to move that to that same point. So we just take our point geometry that we've created and input that into the base. And now we have a nice new sphere. Okay, and I now have two suns, which is kind of wild. Okay, so then if you want to, you can see I've kind of adjusted my sun. I wanted it a little bigger. So the default radius is again 1 foot, so it's a 2-foot wide sun. If you want to, you can add it like 1.5 or something. Right click and then edit, and I made the max to 2 foot. Okay, so it can get to be like a 4-foot wide sun. That's pretty big, but something around there. Okay, and then I right clicked and I renamed this sphere into sun. Okay, I grouped him together, kind of saying he's special, gave it a blob, and then I can group this together because this is kind of all one series to create to make the sun, and then I need to create these two as separate groupings, right? So I have to relabel these. Okay, this is my azimuth, right? And turn off that goal sun because he's now distracting. Okay, so the second slider that we had created was the azimuth, right? He moves about the center, so let's change him azimuth. And then this, oh, sorry, moving quickly. This is the height, so the altitude. So I'm going to right click and name that altitude. And then both I'm going to make a nice big blob. Okay. And just kind of order these. Now, they're all important in their own ways, but I would actually say that we're probably not going to change this guy too much, nor are we really going to. This height isn't going to actually affect the way the script is constructed. He's not causing any response in the geometry later, so I would actually kind of pull him out, give him a different color, and kind of say that he's unique because this is the guy that is going to be what is our responder. Okay, he controls the response just by the location of the sun about the center. Okay, so that's the sun system. You can also, go ahead and kind of group all of this extra stuff that is, or not extra, but the building block stuff. And then I kind of have my sun set as a separate thing. That way I can, oh, I almost wonder if we don't want to preview off. Yeah, we want him on. Sorry, I'm just going to control, see what we want on and off. I'd probably say, yeah, that's about right. Maybe this guy's on too. Okay, I think that's all we need for our reference environment. So we have, I turned off my construction point and my radius, the rotate, all this extra stuff, and I kept the tag on. I kept this line on for north. I kept my circle on, right, the compass, and then I kept my sun on, of course, because he's kind of key. Okay, I'm gonna rename this to compass. Okay. So that is kind of step one. It's just setting up the environment for our responsive piece. Okay. I'm going to kind of leave this up here a second, so in case you are, you are going back and forth, maybe you can just double check that you have all of your capsules going in the right direction. Okay, I'm going to move on. The last thing I can think to add here is probably the most obvious, which is some title. Calling it Sun System, and I'm going to make it a little bit bigger. Okay. And there we are, part one done. Okay, so next we're going to start constructing the base plane. Okay, so I've gone through all of this stuff. This is the same. Now we're going to go into the responsive system, and the responsive system starts with this base surface. Okay, you can see here that I have this kind of base surface here that's located at the center. Okay, this is all of the supporting construction, but ideally this is what our goal is. Okay, so we have some centered surface from which we're going to divide an array, circles or polygons or whatever shape you want to have as the responsive part of your design. But this is their kind of base surface that acts as our facade wall. Okay, so you can see to create that, I use this capsule, which is called a plane surface. Plane surface, okay. And you can just type that in. Okay, it should look like this. Here, create a plane surface. Okay, and the default is, of course, always at x and y at 0, 0. So what you need to do is you need to flip that plane, right? So he's in the x and the y-axis. We want it to be in the x and the z-axis. So the plane needs to be xz here. Okay, and you can see how it's created this plane there. If we input that new planar surface into that, it will now reorient itself. And this is actually working right now as the at the center point, right? However, if I give it a size, so my x and y are going to control the width and the height of my plane. So if I say, I think we had 40 up there, so if I give 40 for x and 40 for y, it will create the plane in both the positive and in both the positive directions of the x and the now z axis. Okay, right, our y here is actually z because we've flipped the plane. Okay, so how to control that is we actually need to give it a move. You can see that was the capsule that we're visualizing here. In the move, we need to move half the distance in the x direction, okay, in the opposite way. So that's what this does for us. Okay, we have a division by 2, and then it moves negative, it moves in the opposite direction, and then this is the direction that it should move in, right? It's going to move in the x direction. Okay, so we just need to bring down this move capsule. Let's move capsule, input the plane. The default motion is going to be z, right? You can see that here in the z. Turn this guy off now. Okay, it's in the z-axis, so we need to give it an x motion. Okay, see it's shifted in the x direction, but it's moving positive, and the default factor is 1. So we need to change this so that it moves in the opposite direction. So we're going to give it a negative motion now. Negative doesn't have a value, so the value that we want it to move is going to be this number slider divided by 2. Okay, so I bring down a division. Oop. Division, okay. And my result will go into the value, and then I'm going to input my A, 40 into the A value here, and then I need a panel here to say I want it to be 2, and always 2. Right click, I'm going to take away the title, so it's just a 2 in a box. Okay, so that's our new surface, and now as we adjust this, it will always stay at the 0, 0 point at midpoint. Okay, I'm going to turn this off, and then another thing to note for this number slider, because we are dividing by 2, you can see it's jumping back and forth in between these 38, 30, 40, but it also has odd numbers in there as well, which we don't necessarily want. So one thing you can do in this edit command is you can do edit and then go to even numbers, and that will only slide between the even numbers. You also have odd numbers here too, in case you do want to ever use just odd numbers, right? But right now we want only even numbers because we're going to divide by 2, so we don't need all those in-betweens. Okay, there we go. Now it's jumping 40, 42, 44. It's good. Okay, so that's this this first part of the responsive system. Is just getting our plane set up. Okay, so I'm going to give it a scribble. We'll call it base surface. And I'm going to group all of this so it's its own thing. And I should probably be less sloppy about how I'm setting this up, huh? Kind of working over myself. Okay, so the next thing we need to do is we actually need to divide this surface. And I think at this point you are probably going to be tired of dividing the surface like this because you know this so well. We're going to use our isotrim and our divide domain to divide that surface. Okay, so we have divide domain and we have isotrim. Okay, remember we used these a couple times now where we, like on the Nervy dome, we use this to take our geometry, our surface. Okay, and our surface also has to go into the domain to divide, and then we need to insert our divide domain into the isotrim. Okay, and that's going to be what creates all of these subsurfaces for us to then apply some sort of circle or polygon to. We can also control the UV count here. As we're working, we've created a square, right, with our planar surface, so I'd probably suggest making those the same, just for uniformity's sake, but if you want to do something else, go for it. I haven't tried it, so if it looks weird, it doesn't work, I can't help you. Well, I probably can, but I would say just try this first. Okay, so right click, edit, and then I would make the max probably 20 so that we are careful not to break our system, right? The more divisions we have, and then as we go on with the rest of the script, we're asking it to update, not just, 10 by 10, so 100 surfaces. We can quickly get to 1,000 if we did 100 divisions of this, which could really lag our grasshopper. So we want to be careful with how many divisions we're doing. Okay, so I'm going to kind of keep it I'll probably keep it at 10 for now, and then we can have that as a play item later. Okay, I'm going to turn off my original base surface and then give this a scribble and call this the subsurface. Group together. Okay. Call it subsurfaces. Should be plural. Okay. All right, so it should look something like this right now, where you have your surface and it's divided a certain number of times. Okay. Easy enough. All right, so the next thing we need to do, and this is where we kind of I have two options in the script. Option A is we use an evaluate surface to find the normal of the normal of the surface. So remember, the normal is the perpendicular vector to the surface, and in using that, we can use this circle, what's called circle CNR, which is a circle that's defined by a center, a normal, and a radius. So it means the normal is just saying that we can orient to a particular direction. Okay, so if I have the normal of a surface, I can orient my circle to align with that normal. Okay, so that's option one, or option A. Option B is to this is, I think, the nervy dome approach, where we deconstruct each of these surfaces. It's better if we turn it on. Ooh, that's a lot. We'll do this. We deconstruct each of these surfaces, okay? And then we find the end points of each surface, create a diagonal from that diagonal line, okay? From that diagonal line, we find the midpoint on each surface, and then that midpoint becomes the new origin of our standard circle. Okay, so these are two options. I'm going to do option A because I find that the simplest method. Okay, but option B also exists, and it's by no means incorrect. The only time things are incorrect in Grasshopper is if they don't work, but this also works. Okay, so just a different means and methods. Okay, so I'm going to use this first option. So I'm going to go up here, and I'm going to double click, and I type in evaluate surface. Okay, surface is going to be this main surface, right? But then we need the point, and the point is going to be the center point of each one of these surfaces. Okay, so remember when we did the isotrim, we've now divided our one surface into 10 by 10, so 100 new surfaces. So I should be able to find the area of my geometry, okay? And that area is going to give me back 100 new center points for each one of those surfaces. And then that can become my evaluate surface. Okay. All right, so then if I grab my my circle, I can type circle CNR, right, defined by the center, the normal, and the radius. Okay, I would have my center point for my new circle to be at the centroid, and then I'm going to choose the normal of each one of these center points. And that's, as you can see, already updated my circle to those new locations. The next thing to do, of course, is to control the radius, which is the responsive part of the script. Okay. How do we make this so it's not so distracting? Okay. So I'm going to give this a scribble here and kind of say this is my circle array. And this is going to be my circle circle. It's been very strange lately. My blob doesn't want to work sometimes. Okay, well, I'm trying to blob that. Okay, so if you haven't done this yet, I'm going to save my current file since we've made relative progress, right? We're about halfway done with the script. Okay. So we have our circles, we have evaluate surface. Okay, so now we need to work through the responsive part of the script. So I'm going to, again, give you about 10 seconds to just double check that you have this part set up right before we move on. Okay, I'm going to turn this guy off and just leave let's turn him off so I only see my circles. Okay, so now let's work through the responsive part. Okay, so we need to set up what is kind of a list control. The way that this is set up in particular is that this is kind of like dividing the list, okay? So that there's a limit that is set in the list separation. Okay, so we have list A and we have list B. List A is going to direct this remapping. Okay, it's called remapping, but it's really just radius control from what is small to large, meaning it's from every degree that is from 0 to 200. It will increase the radius. So these will get larger as the sun moves towards the 200 mark. Then after it crosses the 200 mark, that's the second portion of the script and the second part of this list, this B, where we have every degree from 201 to 360, where it starts to decrease in size. Okay, and so that's the responsive control, where we're really just dividing the degrees. We're remapping those degrees so that they have some sort of control of the radius. Okay, so that is what remapping is doing here, remap numbers. It's saying, okay, so from, let's see, let's go to this one, from 0 to 200, that is going to respond, or that's going to create a target list or some sort of target radius list, right? It's going to change the radius from 0 to 2 feet. That's what this is, okay? So the source is the degrees, and then it has this is creating a relationship from the degrees to the radii in feet, okay? And you can see here that the output is, right now it says 1.54, and that's purely based on the location of this sun about 0. So as I move 0 to This is probably at like 150 or something. So if I go back to my script, I can kind of see, yes, it's at 154. So, right, and that makes sense because it's at 154. So it's literally remapping these numbers, these degrees into a specific distance for our circles to respond to. Okay, so to make that, we need first to divide the list. So we're going to grab what is called a dispatch. And dispatch is a way of yes, dividing the list. But what it requires is some sort of pattern to control that. And so we'll need not just dispatch, but we need evaluate as well. Okay, so I'm going to double click and just find these for us first. So dispatch is going to be our list divider, and evaluate is going to be the pattern that we divided. Okay, and you can see here how list A is working right now, but list B isn't. That's because the evaluate expression that we put in. So we'll have evaluate. Okay. All right, and then we have this is technically the list that is being input, and right now you'll see that it says negative. This is negative because if we follow this wire back up to our azimuth control, which is, remember, this is I should go to our script. Azimuth control, this is the location about 0, but it had, in the previous script, we had scripted this as a negative value. Okay, so I have negative in there. We don't actually need that for ours that we're doing in class today. Okay, don't want you to get confused, so I'm going to bring this up and we're going to model this here. Okay, so we really just need dispatch and we need the evaluate. We're going to grab our list, which is going to be this number slider. Okay, so our azimuth is going to be input into the list for dispatch and also into the expression. Okay, and I need to, I did that too quickly. Sorry, I zoomed in and I got rid of variable y by just clicking the minus. Okay. And then the expression editor, so for variable x, let's see. Oh, I did that backwards. What am I thinking? No wonder. Work with this first. Okay, so the expression is going to be something that we type in here. We don't need variable y. Variable x, sorry, is going to be where we input the list. And the expression is going to be right click, and it's going to be x less than 2. Okay, big X. Okay, and I've had this happen every single time I do
What was
this.
the expression?
Sorry, x less than, it should be x less than 200. X is less than 200, yes. And every time I do this, I don't know why this is anywhere different from what I'm doing here. What? Did I type it in funky or what? X less than 200. Yeah, okay. I don't know why, but lately it's been doing that. If I type it in, it just freaks out. And then if I use this, it's fine. So if you do, it should be X, and then it should be smaller than, less than 200. And then it should work like this, where you have your x variable going into this input, and then your result can be your dispatch pattern. Okay. I don't know, did anyone else have problems with their expression? Or is it just
I
my
did.
grasshopper? Okay,
I,
maybe I need to update or something. I don't know. It's
no. It happened with mine too.
oh, it did. Okay. Oh,
How do you fix it? Mine's still red.
okay. Uh, I had to open the expression. Well, I copied and pasted actually from my previous script because I had gotten it to work before. But if you click on if you right click and you go to expression editor and you open this up, you should be able to uh, type in x and then use this smaller than 200 to get that to work. So I don't know if it's something about the keyboard. It should still work, but if you use these operators, it seems to be clearer, I guess. Did you get them to work or no?
Yeah, no, it's still red.
It's still red. Did you try oh, you know what it might be? I did change this label to x. So if it says variable x, and then in the expression editor, it'll probably say your variable is x is a number. And then that way it recognizes this as x itself.
Yeah, that worked.
Did that work? Okay, all right. Yeah, I think that's probably the key. It was getting, and I think I didn't switch it first, which is why I got red. Okay, I was wondering. I don't really use this that much, so that explains it. Okay, so x needs to be x, and expression editor needs to be x minus 200. Okay, so then that result then is true. Okay, good. And then if we look at, let's look at the panels, make sure that this worked correctly. Okay, so I'm going to add a panel for each of these. That way I know that whether or not this is working. So you can see here list A has 198, right? And my expression was x is less than 200. So that means that anything that's less than 200 should be going to list A. And then list B should be like kind of, it shouldn't work. It should just kind of like be some sort of orange. However, now that I've increased my azimuth, right? I've increased it. As I pull that up, then I should look and I should see that A is no longer working because right next this is X and it needs to be less than 200 for true. And if it's not, then it moves to the false list. So if I see my results as false, and then that way these are all the values greater than 200. So this should be 201, 2360. I think I might label these so that we remember this. 201 to 360. Okay, I'm going to label this guy 0 to 200. And that way I can kind of quickly visualize what is happening in my script. Okay. All right, I think that's good. Okay, so then the next part, so we did our list control, and you can see how I've kind of set that up the same way. Now we need to remap the numbers. So we need to pull down one of these remaps, and then we need to have two construct domains. Okay, so
Sorry, I'm not processing that last part with the panels and what was true and what was false for the list.
okay, all right. Yeah, let's walk through this again. I feel like I kind of stumbled on when I didn't get my expression just right. So, okay, so we have two capsules here. We have dispatch, which this is pretty much just like, we'll call it list divider. It's going to split our list into two separate lists. Okay, and that's coming from this over here. If you think of this list as a list, this is really starting from 0, 0, and it moves up to 360. Okay, so this is really a list of 360 values. If I go down here and I take a look at my list that's being input, and I hover over, it says one value says 360. Okay. This one list as 360 values is going to divide, or it's 360 is going to divide that list into two separate lists, one with values from 0 to 200 and one with values from 201 to 360. Okay, and it's not like this is just going to, so if this list that's coming in is say 220, it will go into list B. If this is 19, it will go into list A. And so it's really just acting as some sort of like director, right? It's directing the values to each list, depending on what number that is. And that's what this is controlling, is that our expression that we put in is if x is less than 200, our result is going to be true, okay? But because right now it's 360, it's false, right? If I go up here and I change this to 161, and I go back down, x is coming in at 161. The expression says it's going to be true if it is under 200, yes. So now it's updated and it's changed my list output to be coming from list A. Okay. So the reason we're doing that is because we're going to then use the values from 0 to 200 to control the radius. Okay, that is going to have some relationship to the radius using this remap. Okay, so you can see here I've constructed two domains. One domain is from 0 to 200, and this one is going to be feeding from, if we look at where this information is coming from for remap, it's going to be coming from list A. And as I change that, remember I had said I'd change this number that comes in, and if it flips between list A and list B, it will change which remap it uses. Okay, so right now it's not using remap B. It's only using remap A, and that's because the location is under 200 degrees. Okay, so it's at 157 degrees. So because it has a larger number, it has some sort of southern, right, north, south, at 157 to say even 220 probably, it's going to create a larger radius because of these remapped solutions that we're going to make. Okay, so that's why there's two lists. Is the first list is going to remap these degrees from small to large radii, and then the second remap is going to take the second part of the list, so the second list, list B, and remap those degrees from 201 to 360. Okay, so that's why there's two lists, because we need these radii to have a response only when it's at southern exposure. And that requires some sort of peak, right? So it's thinking of it as like a small radii here where they get really tiny. I wonder if I can't do that. Right? They're going to get really tiny when the sun is at a certain location. Okay, so if it's at the north part of the circle, I'm going to have to turn back on my whole script. If it's at the north part of the circle, it's going to make the radii very small. But then as the sun shifts about the south side, it's going to start drawing. It's going to still be at the list A, but then as it's going to create some sort of peak radius about 200. Okay, so it's as big as these are going to get. And then they have to start to decrease because our sun is going to start to move behind the screen, right? So that's why there's two lists, because there needs to be some sort of, like if we kept one list, we would have to, these would just keep getting bigger, or we'd have to cut the list at some point. But with two lists, we're able to create one, one control for small to large, and then another control from large to small. Okay, I feel like I went on a tangent, so I figured let's just do it. Okay, so I'm going to turn back on my sun because that's helpful. Circle, line, and north arrow. Okay, and then we're going to turn back on our circle wall, and then we're going to have to start working with our list divider here. So, like I said, we have to remap these numbers. Okay, so for 0 to 200, we're going to need a remap number. Remap numbers. Okay, and then we need a source that's going to be a constructed domain and a target that's going to be another construct domain. Construct domain. Okay. 0 to 1. Okay. We have remap numbers, and I need to copy and paste this. Okay. All right. So this is going to be for list A only. We need 1, 2, 3 capsules. Okay, list A is going to be the value that's going to be input to the remap number. Then we're going to need the source, which is going to be this 0 to 200. So our domain start will be 0 by default, which is fine, but our domain end needs to be some value. So we can either do a number slider, or we can bring out a panel. And since this isn't going to change, we can just create a stopped panel, so we don't change it ever. Okay. And that way our output there, it says 0 to 200. Okay, so that's going to be the source list of those 0 to 200 degrees that are now going to have a new relationship to our target list, which is the radii control. And that's going to be the second construct domain, which is again going to have a default start of 0, which probably is fine, though I would maybe think you'd want to make that not 0, 0, but like, I don't know, 0.001. Okay, so it's never fully 0. And then our domain end can be, say, 2. Okay, notice I just constructed and pasted. I just copied and pasted that. Okay. All right, so our target list will be from almost 0 to 2, and then 0 to 200 for our source list. Okay, and then if I take out another panel, I take a look at my mapped numbers, you can see that it has remapped this 0 to 200 for some value between 0 and 2. So it's saying 1.6 is going to be the new radii. Okay, and then if I input this into my radius, okay, list A is now going to be our only control. So as I go back and I move my azimuth from 0 to 200, I now have a responsive system that stops working at 200, right? That's because we need list B to then pick up the other half of the numbers. Okay, not half, they should really be 180, I know, but 200 is so nice. Okay, so we have the first half working. Now we need to get the second half working. Okay, so let's go over here.
My first path is not working.
Your first path is okay. I think I have my volume up really loud. You scared me. yeah, okay, so how about I'll just keep this up here for a second and then I'll talk through it one more time. Okay. So we have remap numbers here. Remap. Okay, it should look like that. And the value that goes into it is going to be our first list, right? Everything from 0 to 200 is going to go into our value. And then we have to construct a domain that is the same limit. Okay, so we have 0 and then I have 200 that I use the panel for. I can hover over my domain output and check this. And also, why don't you also make sure that you have the correct construct domain too. Okay, construct domain should be 0 to 1. Okay. And we
I think it has like the left part of the remap. I don't know what the remap is going to. I think that's why I don't have the other part.
ooh, which can you describe for me the output that
Like the map, like for mine, it doesn't connect to anything.
oh, okay, yes. So right, so I quickly did that. So I used, remember the circle we created, the circle array? And we didn't
Oh,
have a radius input. So what I did was I took this new, what we're seeing output as I used this as to be the new radii. Okay, so I took that mapped number, that remapped number, and I input it into the new, into the radius for that. Um, the thing is that now that I've done that, my circles only work for 0 to 200 degrees. Okay, so
uh,
we're going to have to create a copy of this for list B. Okay,
okay. Now
so
it's working.
now it's working. Okay, cool. All right, yeah. All right, so yeah, let's title this so that we make sure we know which is which. We'll say call this list A, and then we'll say 0 to 200. Okay, and you can also maybe say or let's 0 to 200, small to large. Okay, group those together. I'm leaving him out because he's just info for me. Okay, you know what, let's also be good and title him as list divider. Again, these are just info things. I'm leaving them outside of it. Okay, so really what we can do is we can copy this, copy and paste, and start to adjust these numbers. Okay, so if I zoom in here, this is now going to be list B, and this is going to be for degrees 201 to 360, and these are going to be moving from large to small. Okay, so now that I've kind of explained what is happening here, does anyone want to take a guess as to what value we put in to our new remapped numbers? Is it too obvious? Since we have our list A going here, our list B should be our new value. So we can replace this value. Notice it's orange, right? And then if you take a guess as to why it's orange, notice there's a value for list A and there's no value for list B. Right?
So then, do we have to change the azimuth so that way it would be so there'll be a value there?
Very good. Yes. Yep. We have to go back here, and if we want a value for that, it has to be over 200, right? It has to be 201 to 360. So as we move this along the circle, and we get something like 260, this new circle is going to need, or this new script is going to need our second part, right? Notice how list A now doesn't have a value and list B does. So we have to update our list B here and enter that information into our circle as well. Okay. So so our value is from list B, but our source then, if we are going from small to large up top and we're going from large to small down here, what do these construct domains start to look like then? If we're going from small to large, then we should probably do what?
360 for the first one, right?
360? Yep,
Yeah.
good, okay. Yep, so you do 360 as your start point, which is the largest, and then your end is going to be 201. Okay, and then for these, if we just flip them, we can have our large point, our large radii as our start and our small radii as our domain end, right? And so then that should remap the degrees from 360 to 201, and then they should have a new radii that's going from large to small. Okay, so if I now take this remapped numbers and I hold shift and I input that into, because I want both values going in, right? So we have both of these going into the same radii input. And that means that as we start to adjust our degree, it will flip back and forth between each of these lists, pulling whichever radii is being used, right? So if list A is not working, then it'll pull from list B. And if list B is not working, it'll pull from list A. So both of these wires are going to go into our radii. Okay. So let's check that this works. So we have to go back to the azimuth and start to, oh, maybe I flipped those. Oh, I bet I did. I think I flipped them. Right, because our 360 is up here. Our 360 is actually, I was wondering, I was like, that's right. No, we actually need this to be this the end and this to be the start. I thought I remembered flipping them before, but sorry. Yes, there we go, right? Because we want it to be larger when it gets down here. And then as it gets to 360, we need it to actually be smaller. So that's my bad. So you had your construct domain, and you actually have to flip them. So you have 201 as your start and 360 as your end, and then the end will be the smaller of them. Okay, right? That makes sense. Okay. So now we should have a full working script. If we move this about from 360 and we move it about to flip over at 200, you can see it starts to get smaller. So 200 is the peak radius, and then it will start to get smaller as it moves about that circle towards the north. Okay, so that's your responsive script. Okay, and I could do this all day because it's quite mesmerizing. Okay, so I'm going to leave this second part up, and then I'm also going to step away and get a drink of water and take that break that is like a 5-minute break. So I'll just leave this up here for you guys if you want to double check that you have everything correct. Remember, I changed that this list from large to small. Remember, our start is now 201 to 360, 2.001, and then these are flipped, right? better. You can see. Okay, so I'm just gonna stop my camera, get a drink. You guys should too. Let's say, can we say 9:45? Is that too quick? 3 minutes? Okay, and we'll say 9:40.
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, I was gonna say, but that's a little too quick.
That's too quick? Okay, how about how about 9:50? That's 8
Great.
minutes. That's good. Okay, well now we have 7 minutes, so okay. All right, I'm just gonna leave up my screen for you guys, but I'll be stepping away. Okay. Hello. Sorry. Sorry. Oh, okay. Yeah, I heard you guys had midterms. It's okay. And actually, why don't I do another sweep of folks? It looks like we have a few more people here. So, yeah, Alec, I think you'll want to just watch the YouTube video, but and take a look at the homework for this week. I'll go over at the end of class too, but there's kind of maybe a new twist that you should pay attention to, which is just kind of doing research on a graphic style and then trying to either mimic it or develop your own from that. So, yeah, so kind of fun, a little bit of a new thing for you. Okay, looks like Mateo Mystica and Stephanie. Okay, yeah, a few folks I missed. Okay. Okay. All right, I think I have everybody. Yes, I think for the most part it has. We're going to, if you're visiting later, we're going to be going through the second half of this script. So we were doing responsive architecture. We've gotten so far as to create this array with a kind of sun, and then use the sun location to create larger shading and smaller shading. Okay, using arrayed circles. So that's the first part of class. The second part is going to be, we're going to use our skills of graph mapper. You guys remember, probably remember that from the twisted tower, right? The warped tower we did. We used graph mapper to control or to remap values. So we're going to do the same thing for the second part of this script. Okay, so we have one where they're all changing the same radius, and then now we're going to adjust that radius, right? And maybe I should pull that up here. You can see. Okay. As I start to, this is my original script, right? So that is the responsive part. It's still a part of it. But then I have my graph mapper part where I've added this kind of remapped values for my radii across the surface. So I have kind of two controls, right? One is from the sun and the other one is my design. Okay. So, all right, so let's get started on this. You can see it's not really too much more. It's just kind of making sure the wires are going into the correct locations, right? So if we look at, I think I kept this up long enough for you guys to recognize that this is the remapping, right? Small to large, large to small. So, so what my graph mapper is going to do, what I've done actually, is I've used the radii from the both of these remapped numbers, right, from the small to large and the large to small, and I've added graph mapper so that I can multiply whatever this radius is. Okay, adding it to a multiplication, and I'm multiplying that by whatever the graph mapper output is. Okay, and then from that I get a new list of values that are my new radii that are being controlled with the graph mapper, but also getting the input from the responsive system. So it's really just a multiplication that we're using to get both systems to respond. Okay. So the graph mapper part should look somewhat familiar, right? Remember, we bring down a graph mapper here, right? And it's that kind of blank TV box. You know, we don't really have any script in it just yet. But if you do remember, we needed two capsules to really get the graph mapper to work. One was a range, and the other was some sort of domain. And you can see here that my domain is actually being pulled from my one of my construct domains over here, my small to large. So I'm using the same domain of radii, saying I want it to be 0 to 2 feet. Here, 0 to 2 feet. And then I have some range that I'm pulling values from. So I'm using my list length, okay, to find the number of circles I have. Okay, I want to know the total number of circles, and that is going to be how many steps I have in my range, right? So this is going to create some sort of output value, like a certain number of numbers, number of numbers, and I need that list to match the number of circles that I have in my facade screen. Okay, so each of these multiplication lists should also match that same list length of, okay, so this must be my 12 by 12 foot grid because I have a list length of 144. Each of these should also be 144 values. Okay, so that's how we check that these things are going to match, right? They're going to coincide because we need the same number of radii for the same number of circles. Okay, so that's where the range comes in. Okay, so let's grab a range too, since we're here. Okay, and the range will be input into our graph mapper. And then let me, actually, I'm going to bring this up to our old script, so I'm modeling where we were. Okay, so for graph mapper, we have our domain, which I'm going to use this domain. Okay, from our small to large, right? We had 0.001 to 2. It could probably be 0, but I just thought it'd be fancy. Okay, so that's going to be my domain. And then my steps are going to be coming from my number of circles. So I can go up here and I can look at the first part of my script here. And I can probably, I could probably grab them from the subsurface. This gives me the quantity of surfaces. I can also grab it from my centroid. But what I want to do is I want to find out how long these lists are. So if I do list length, okay, here, list length, I can use any one of these. After we divide the surface, these should all have the same number of values, 100 defined values, 100 defined values, 100 defined values. Okay, so I can pull these from really any of them, and my list length will be the output of however long that list is. Okay, so if I put this in, we can see it's 100. So if I pull in my centroid, it's 100. 100, doesn't matter. Any of these will work. Okay, we just want that number because he's going to now be our number of steps, okay, for our range. Now remember, this range adds an extra value. So if I hover over my input for steps, it says, yes, 100. But if I look at my range output, it says 101. So if I right click and I type in the expression x minus 1, that will change whatever this length, it will maintain the list length, right? It will always subtract that extra range number that it adds to it, okay? So if I hover over this, it will always be 100 now, okay? Remember that was right click, expression, x minus 1. Right click, expression, x minus 1, yep. And then this part should at least be good. The graph mapper part,
Wait, so there should
yep.
be 2 lines coming out of it? Well, like in terms of so like for the end result, it should be going into the range and then, oh, okay, never mind.
Yeah, this is you don't need this. This is just to show you how long the list is. Just so you know that I was showing you that each of these will give you the same output. So it doesn't matter what you choose. It's just the length that we care about. Yeah, sorry. Okay, so you have, right, so that's going in, it's subtracting 1, and then it adds 1, and now we have 100 values that we're going to get from our graph mapper. From the graph mapper then, we have to right click and choose a graph, right? We go to graph types. I had a Bezier curve, but if you want to try something else, you can, parabola, whatever. I like the Bezier because I have more, there's a bit more control, right, this way. So it's up to you guys what you want to do. But if you remember, we need this domain to match the input domain. So we have to double click and go into our graph editor here, and the max value needs to be 2 for each of these. 2, okay. And then our x value, I was tricksy and did 0.001 and y 0.001. Okay. And that way, both of these domains now will it will create values. It will create a range of radii between 0.001 and 2 for us, okay, based on this graph. Okay. Now we can't just input this, right? We needed those multipliers. We have to connect this information to the responsive system. So I'm going to do 2 multiplications. Multiplication. Okay, copy, paste, because we need 1. I'm going to put these each in B. But we need one of these to act as our multiplier for the mapped number, this guy, right? The 0 to 200, small to large. So we're going to take those map numbers and input them into this one. And then this guy is going to take our list B, mapped from large to small. And again, this will be flipping between, we need some sort of flip between each of these lists, okay? Because right now they're separate. So, so I'm going to group this and kind of just call this my graph mapper. Graph map radii, maybe. Control G. Okay. I have my multiplication, and now I need to join these lists. I need to join them in a way that my circle here can flip between the two of them. So I'm going to look back at what I did before, and you'll see, yes, I have. Okay, those are my 2 multiplications. Ooh, smart, I added little labels. I should do that. So this is the combiner before I bring it into the circle array. And what this does is it flips in between both of these lists as I change that degrees, right? So as I go 0 to 200 and then flip to 200, 1 to 360, it has to change in between these lists. So I'm using here what is called a stream filter. And a stream filter kind of works just like a water dam. So, you know, a water dam, there are different gates. That's what this is called. And as you open a gate, it will allow different flows of water. And here is the same concept, but it's different flows of data. So I'm going to use a Boolean, so a kind of true and false, to open gate 0 or open gate 1. Okay, and gate 0 is my list A, and gate 1 is my list B. Okay, and this work, I'm really inputting this so that it seamlessly flips in between them and I don't have to do anything later. Okay, so it'll use whatever the degrees value is and just automatically flip in between them using this evaluate expression again. Okay, so all right, so let's go up, and I'm going to grab my stream. Oh, stream. Okay, we want stream filter. Okay. Notice there was a stream gate there too. The stream gate essentially does the exact opposite, where you have a stream that's flowing in and then it chooses different gates to open. So kind of nice to know you can do the inverse. But stream filter is what we want. Okay. So the streams are going to be our first list and our second list. And I'm going to label those because I saw I did that before and that was helpful. Okay. We have 0 to 200 degrees for our first list. Okay, copy paste. And then this one's going to be 201 to 360 for our second list. And then I'm going to add these to the group. Okay. There. All right, so then our gate is going to be that expression again, where it's going to be if x is greater than 200. But remember, we had that from before, so we should be able, if you got this working, to copy and paste this. And this is going to be the exact same from the list divider. Remember, we divided it into two lists. This will give us the same concept of whether it's a true or a false. So it'll give us a Boolean of which gate to go. Okay, so 0 for true and 1 for false. So if I bring this over here, and it still has x value connected to it, right? So I should be able to use this output then as my my gate control. So now how do we tell if this is working? So we need panels. Okay, we need panels to make sure all this is working. So I'm going to use a panel for this guy. I'm going to use a panel for this guy. A panel for this guy. Okay. So we have our list A and our list B. He should be stream 1 and he should be stream 2. Or stream 0 and stream 1. But notice the stream that's being input right now, this result, should match the output of our stream filter, right? But if we hover over our Boolean is right now saying true because it is true because it's x is less than 200. So if x is less than 200, then it will get it will choose gate 1. Okay, so this is our true and this is our false. We need to actually flip these, so we need to flip them so that our gate that's being opened is x is less than 2 is actually our first gate, right? Our first stream. So we can either flip these, okay, so that they match. See how they match now? Or we can go in and we can change the expression and flip this so that x is greater than 2. Either way will work, but what we need really is just for whatever our Boolean is to match the stream that is aligned with that Boolean, right? So if this is true and 1 is true, then we need to make sure that x that's less than 200 is also going into that same stream. Okay. Does that make sense? Okay, so this is our Boolean. Okay, true. And if we hover over this, you can see that that says 1. So we need 1 to be the true, right? X is less than 200. If it's greater than 200, we need it to be in stream 0. So these two actually have to be flipped like that. Or you can change the expression and keep them as is. Okay. But now we get a list. We should have a list of varying radii based on both the responsive um, mapping that we've done over here, remapping, and then the graph mapped radii. So we should be able to take our circle radius. I'm actually going to copy and paste this so that we have 2 of them. Okay. Should be able to take this circle and input my news stream into here and turn this on. Okay, turn this guy off. Okay, turn it all off, and then if I go take a look at what's happening, right, my stream filter, and you can see that our radii are now updated with a kind of ability to control the design of the apertures in addition to how big and small they are based on the sun's location. Okay. And then if I go back here and I go back to my azimuth and I start to adjust these, it should seamlessly flip in between the two. Right at 360, it's almost nothing, and then they will open as we get southern sun and then go back down to small and almost nothing, 0. Okay. Okay. All right, so I'm just going to leave this up for a second. Make sure you guys label these things. I'll say this is my list control. Okay. Group blob if we can. Yeah, it doesn't want to blob. Okay. Okay, so do you guys have any questions about this?
No, looks pretty straightforward.
Pretty
I came a little
straightforward.
bit late, but I really like the new implications of the modules.
The new implications of the modules. You mean the responsiveness?
Yeah,
Yeah.
the
Yeah,
way you can.
yeah, the way you can like flip back and forth and kind of control based on so yeah, it's hopefully this will be useful for your designs as you move forward with studio and stuff. If anything, it's just a nice thing to have in your back pocket, right?
Yeah, this one actually kind of reminds me of a video Palooza made second semester, where he made I think it was like a field of rectangles that was supposed to be like a memorial. And I think he may have done a randomizer instead, but this reminds me a lot of it, at least the coordination of small to large going from front to back.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. Do you remember if he used a graph mapper?
Yeah,
Did he? Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty. I mean, it's pretty versatile, right? Because we used it on the tower, and then we also used it, I think, when we did the shark gills, we did some graph mapping on the surface of that, and then here, right? It's just kind of a nice effect, I guess.
It's useful. It's just I'm not very good with graphs, so sometimes it confuses me.
Oh yeah, well, thank goodness I like the magic buttons, right? You know, you don't have to necessarily type in numbers for it. You can just kind of shift these around or play with them. Yeah. Like as a design tool, it's kind of free, but
That's true. It is a free tool, but
oh, the other thing I was going to say is if, so we did all circles, right? But you can change these and you can start to play with other geometries and stuff. I tried to do a couple of weaver bird things, but it wasn't having it with meshes. I did not want to follow it would do the responsive, I think, but it wouldn't do the graph mapping, and I'm not sure why. So if you can get that to work, I think that would be super cool. But I was thinking, you could also change this up and put it in a polygon, and then this starts to become the radius of the polygon. The plane, then you're going to have to change this to wherever the normal is. Probably here's centroid.
It's kind of hard, like, cause I'm just playing with like the different graphs, but then like whenever like you think about like the sun, with some of like the other graphs, it's like it's not as equal, like for like the sun distribution. But I think I'm the only one who's actually thinking about it like realistically. So, but I don't know.
How do you mean?
So like if you were to choose, like I have it like on the sign one right now.
Mm-hmm.
I guess like that's only like on like the like I just kind of left it as is. So as like the designer, I would have to like adjust it right so that way like I get the sun in all areas, right? On like the south side.
Right. If you're talking about like realistically wanting shading for this and using
Right.
Graph Mapper. Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I mean, you kind of see that sometimes, right? Where you have maybe more of the shading is up above and less below, where you have like kind of an overhang and then it dissipates as you go south. Um, so So yeah, I think right as a designer, what you're saying is you need to play with the location of this to kind of get it to actually be something that's useful for you. And that's totally, yes, I think that's a very good comment because as cool as it looks, sometimes it's just not applicable, right? But I mean, come on, that's fun. So far as like playing wise, it's pretty fun. But yeah, okay. So if you guys don't have any questions, I thought I would kind of walk through um, maybe an attempt at, or at least actually I'm going to show you how I created the homework assignment for this week, because I think that's like I used an image, which would be something from your Rhino, right? Um, I used the image of the Rhino and the geometry that we've been basing things off of, but I redrew everything in InDesign, just because it was cleaner and quicker for me to do. And it's also something I prefer. I like InDesign because I'm able to do these things. I'm even running a super old version, right? I have CS6. This is before it went to the cloud. So it's kind of wild that really the capabilities, like I use the cloud for work and it's fancier, that's for sure, but the capabilities are kind of, I don't know, the ones that I use are about the same. So, yes, before I go into that, are there any other questions for, I guess, this whole portion? I'm going to put this up online, of course. Okay, so I will put,
I think oh,
no, go for it.
I think the only question that I had was just how did you change the shape? Because I think while you were playing with shape, I was playing with graphing, so I
Oh,
wasn't paying attention.
right. Okay, yeah. Well, that's pretty quick. All I did was I took it as a polygon, right? So, and this is what I was saying is like you could start to, you could use this polygon and then maybe take that kind of offset study that we did or even using Weaverbird somehow. I was trying to do that, but I wasn't liking my meshes for my remapping. So if you guys can get that out figured out, I think it would probably be really awesome. But I used just a polygon, and then I changed the radius using the stream filter, right? That information, and I input that in the radius, and then I used an XZ plane to reorient the polygon to this new plane, right? This new plane,
Oh,
and then I had to give it an origin, and all of the origin points then are coming from my circle centroid. So I actually used part of the older script to get that. So you'd need to probably find the, oh no, it's not my circle centroid, it was the isotrim centroid, right? All of those isotrim surfaces, and then we found the area centroid of that. So I took that center point and I placed my plane there, and then my polygon oriented to that. Turn that off, and you can see that then I just changed the segments. So you know, triangles or diamonds, pentagons start to play. But I think it could kind of be cool if they start to get three-dimensional. So if you again did that with the Weaverbird thing, but before we did Weaverbird, we created those surfaces that had the offset. Remember, they are offset and then they had a smaller radii. So I think that could be really interesting, is taking it another step further, and then these become like three-dimensional, you know, fixtures or something. So I don't know. Have fun with it. I'm looking forward to your assignments as always. And I will save this, of course. I'll save all of this part with all the proper labelings and things. So I think a couple of things might be a little different in that this azimuth is flipped, so there's a negative in here that's, and by flipped I mean this is just so it moves in a particular direction. Okay, so it's going from 0 to negative 360, and in doing that you have to flip that so it's not negative, you know, for your later expressions to work. But otherwise it should be the same. Yeah, I think that's about it. Hope it was fun. I know, like, once I start getting to this stage, it's kind of like, oh man, like I wish we could use more things like this at work or just in design. It's a lot of fun. Okay, so for this last little bit, I'm just going to do probably like a 10-minute walkthrough. But it's kind of like an InDesign, like using InDesign to your advantage. Okay, because you have this one part that is like, it's Rhino modeling, it's designing, it's getting all of these features figured out so that they make sense to what you want, right, as the designer. And then there's this other part that is the communication of that thing that you work so hard to get. And I think one clear way to do that is diagramming, which it might be something your studio professors are working you on. I don't know what I'm sure that they're having you do the standards of like plans and elevations, probably sections, and then maybe details. And renders, I would assume you have some sort of renders that you need to provide. But then are diagrams a part of that study as well? Just like,
Yeah, it was one of the very first things we really had to do was internal and external diagrams with wind, sun, circulation, public, private, you know.
okay. So kind of more, yeah, formal and programmatic diagrams. Did they have you do any like sequence diagrams, kind of just, you know,
it
showing
was
how you
really
go from
for
A to B?
like our forms and how we got there.
Forms, okay. Yep, that makes sense. Because I think that especially for Grasshopper, it's so sequential, how you arrive at a design, and it's a good exercise to try to abstract those steps so that your process is clear to somebody else in a graphic form, and not just because we talked about that, right? Like nobody's going to read your script. So the script is there for this class so we can maybe take a look at what you did, because we can read it. But for somebody who's like, you just learned a language, right? So somebody who's grasshopper illiterate needs something else. And I think if you can get to a point of showing this really complex process, right? Grasshopper is, you're starting to get pretty complex as we get into these responsive forms. Being able to show that step-by-step process using simple diagrams could really, it's a good tool for you to have for, I think, anything you do in diagramming for studio or other projects. Anyways, so I think I really want to see you guys take a stab at diagramming the process that you go through, like what it takes to make your responsive design, and then what your responsive design does, right? So this is a very simple version of it, but what I did was I took an image, okay? I took an image that I found of a process for the Abu Dhabi tower. What is it? It has responsive triangular grid on the outside. I'm not going to remember the name off the top of my head. But it has a responsive kinetic structure right on the outside of it. Responds to daylighting. So I found this diagram for it, and then I thought, it's not very clear. Let's try to diagram over it. And I think it might be a good exercise for you to to make these images in Rhino, and then to try to add another graphic layer over them to abstract them from, and that helps you, I think, take another step of abstracting them from the Rhino space, right? Because you get a lot of wrapped up in the grasshopper, and then this kind of takes it to just line weights and points and coloring. So, right, so I'm going to walk through kind of what I did for this, and notice I use my layers in InDesign. I'm not sure if I remember walking through this a little bit before, but I tried to use my controls to help me select things, right? If I lock it, then I can, or for instance, if I unlocked it right now, I can select all of my text.
Excuse me, Professor.
Yep.
So you were just talking about the tower in Abu Dhabi.
Yes.
It's called Al Bahar.
Al Bahar, thank you. Yes.
Yeah, because that building was my inspiration for my midterm last time. That's why I had those so this reminds me of my what's this midterm. So yeah, that thing.
Yeah, thank you. Yes.
Welcome.
Yeah. Cool. That was your so it's like your research project?
Yeah, so
Like
I did some research of it on how to do it. So yeah, it was
oh,
kind of cool. So
cool.
I did.
So you've already done responsive architecture. Or you
I just kind of thought it was really nice to work on that one for the midterm. So
yeah.
I kind of did work on it.
Oh, okay. Okay. Well, okay, cool. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yes. Okay. So, right, because I just searched like responsive architecture, kinetic architecture, and I found that diagram, and I was like, oh, that tower, yeah. And I didn't think to actually remember what the tower is. So, there we go. That's how that works. But yeah, it's pretty fascinating, right? The just simple shift inwards and outwards, and you get shading devices. It's amazing. So okay, so
Kind
I'm sorry.
of reminds me of a repeated car logo.
Well,
Mercedes.
yeah. Now I'm not going to see anything but that. Dang it. Oh yeah, especially there. Okay. Well, it's still cool. This one too, I think. Yeah, it does the butterfly. I don't know what that one is though. Satori. SD. Anyway, so yeah, that would be kind of cool if you guys find. I'm not going to push that on you, but like if you're, excited by one of these and you try to remake it, I think that would be really super cool. I don't know, in the next week if you have time to figure it out, but maybe even for final, you know, it'll probably be something like this, where you just need to kind of show, you know, apply the grasshopper to a facade or to your studio project, and then show it, you know, so something to think about. Okay, so back to some quick InDesign graph diagramming work. Right, so I like my layers. Like I always try to keep them separate. I know it's not the most exciting thing, but it does help so far as workflow. It also helps for the next person who has to pick up your InDesign. Okay, so notice I have my diagrams on their own layer, and that way I can keep the text on as reference, and then, you know, just work on my diagrams if I want to. Okay, so I'd had that reference set up before, but what I was thinking is, you know, you could almost you could lay out your sequence in Rhino, right? You do this like kind of abstract circle or whatever polygon you choose, or whatever unit I guess you make, and you break it down into its simplest geometry and kind of show how you first build up that shape, and then you would start to talk about how that shape responds. Okay, so I think like that's kind of a good twofold approach. How do you get to the shape, or why is the shape important? I guess if it's just a circle, maybe it's one image, but if it's something more complex, you would need some steps to get there. And then the next part, of course, is the how it responds. So this one's moving in and out, right? And then has some sort of aggregation across a surface. So like I said, so the, oops, what am I doing? Okay, there we go. I'm going to create a new layer here so I can just kind of draw wherever I want. All right, lock this. Okay, now I can't mess with anything. And then I can go through and I can start to kind of doodle these things. So what you can do is I use the pen tool to have an overlay. So I'm going to just redo this diagram. I use the pen tool to have an overlay, or to draw an overlay of whatever shape was beneath it. Okay, and I can change my line weight up here. I can change my color. I can also change my line type. Okay, I have solid. And then as I click on the corners, my pen will create a line in between these points. Okay, and I can create, and as the last one, right, I just clicked on this last point and that created a full shape for me. And now that I have a full shape, I can actually, it's created something that has the ability to fill. Okay, so I can adjust some sort of fill color with this. So if I go to this here, I can go to apply effect to object. If I do drop down and I look at stroke or fill, I can adjust the fill opacity. So this is my opacity control. If I move this down, I can start to adjust whatever that interior is. Okay, so if I turn this off and I take a look at it, you can see that my my fill, so I have to do that every time, right? Because of the object, it'll be both the stroke and the interior. But if I do fill, then I can start to kind of control, you know, that the outside edge is going to stay the same opacity. Maybe I want it a little bit thicker. Okay. But it's a very simple way to go about making an object. Okay. And notice I had a point in the center, so I can just draw. I go over here to my little rectangle or ellipse or polygon tool. Right, ellipse, I can just hold shift and it will create a perfect circle. Okay, control plus value, and I can adjust that to be about center. Okay, if I have my reference on there, I can make sure it's somewhere near center. The other cool part about graphics, if it's diagrams, it doesn't have to be absolutely perfect. And don't tell anybody I said that, but it's true. You have to know what you can get away with and what you can't. And there are some things that just by looking at it will look about right. And then there are some things that If it's like this, it will look about wrong, and it will look obviously wrong. Okay, so you want about right. I know I'm a great teacher for telling you that, but I'm joking. That's probably not the best thing to tell students, but it's true. You can get away with things like not exact lines or things or locations like center points if you have it's fairly accurate. Okay, 99.9. Okay, so then so that was my first one, and then I went through and I just copied and pasted this, right? So now I'm kind of starting to build a sequence. And as I started to build a sequence, I started to notice that I wanted these to be aligned. So what I can do is I can pull from the top here, I can pull a kind of guideline down, okay, and make sure that my center, or if I want to adjust this, maybe my top point or my bottom point, but that these all are following the same line, okay. I can do that again for the bottom ones. And these are you will not see these, right? So it just changed the view here from preview to normal. So if I go back and I go to preview, right, I don't see those lines. They're just guides for me, just like the margin, right? So I can also pull from the side here if I want my top and bottom to align. So say I want my center points to align, or the bottom edge, or whatever point I need to create this kind of background grid that nobody else is going to see but me, but that helps me to figure out whether or not things are in line. Okay. And these have a layer too, so it's something to be aware of. I could put these on my reference layer. If I unlock this, I can pull this down, put them on the reference layer. Okay, same thing with these guys. I can bring this down, put them on the reference layer, and then they will go away as I turn this off and on. Okay, lock. And now they're unmovable because they're also on the lock layer. Okay, just a guide as I'm working through this. Okay. All right, so then the other thing I had here was I had points, so I just copied and pasted points. Move them to my edge. Again, if you have it selected and do Control plus, it will zoom to that point. But this is another thing where you should be working at a large scale and a small scale, meaning you want to zoom in and zoom out quite frequently if you're working with graphics, okay? Because this will let you know a high level of accuracy, but then will also tell you if you zoom out whether or not that is reading properly as we go out. Okay, I'd say that's pretty much reading properly. Yeah. We are still in, let's do preview mode, and then we can see whether or not it's pretty. Okay, so as I work through this, and I'm actually not sure I even like these things having a poche. I'm going to turn this off. As we work through this, I can now copy this whole grouping. So if I select all of this, I do Control G, I can group them, Control C, Control V, and I can bring this over, turn on do I have my reference? I can make sure that my bottom point here is actually where I need it to be. Okay. Sometimes you have to zoom in really. So I don't know who said it, but they said good graphics takes a lot of time, and I was like, yeah, this is true. Like you have to care that it's like somewhat aligned, otherwise it won't, it won't be, and it will show. So you have to kind of like take that extra second to just kind of make sure that things are mostly squared up, and it will add just that next, it'll raise your standard of your graphics. Okay. So then we have these inner lines. Well, what I wanted to do is I actually wanted to ungrouped, and I used the pen tool again to make points. Okay, here, clicked escape, and then made new points. Nope. Clicked escape, there we go. Okay. And then I adjusted the line weights. So I think another thing for you to pay attention to as you're doing your graphic is what line weights are which. So for instance, I made the rule, right? I did that every time I have a new geometry, a new line, I'm going to make the new line thicker, and I'm going to make the lines that are already there thinner. Okay, so as I step in the process, I want my new lines to be what is the geometry that draws my eye, and then the old lines should fall away to the background. I could also try to show this, right, and this is where you start to kind of play with your graphics and make sure that these things are reading, is just by selecting them and starting to see whether or not that's working graphically. Okay. And so when we have these like long discussions about whether or not things are working, this is it. This is the process. Well, I think maybe you could add this could be thicker, this could be thinner. These points could start to fall away, or these points could start to do this. That's the tediousness and also the kind of mastery, right? Is getting to the point where it graphically shows and there's no question as to whether or not somebody is reading it correctly. Okay. For instance, I'm not sure about these dotted lines. Okay. And then there was a point in the center. Right, they look a little thin, they look a little light, and then you start to kind of play whether or not this is actually working. Or maybe it's just too much new information and we should just keep it as is. Okay, and I'm looking at the time and I'm seeing I'm definitely over. So, I can keep talking through this, but it's really just a continuation of what I'm already doing here. Okay, so and also kind of what I want to see for next week. So I want to see some line weight control, some color play, some sort of graphic position, right? That's kind of what you're doing. You're making a position graphically, and not just a snip from Rhino, not just a export image from Rhino. I would like to see an additional post-processing and curation of that step-by-step process.